The last point I want to talk about is some considerations you need to keep in mind when pricing across different distribution channels. For most companies, distribution is an extremely complex topic, and if this interests you, you should probably watch a class on retailing and distribution in general. But a company, let's say, like Ralph Lauren, has a multitude of different channels. Corporate direct channels, like their own website or their flagship stores, specialty retail channels, like the store-in-store concept of Galeries Lafayette, wholesale retail channels like Amazon, and possibly even discount channels like factory outlets. Each of these channels requires their own pricing strategy, and for many companies, they even decide to put certain products in certain channels. A company like Ralph Lauren may decide to produce products only for discount channels, for example. Another decision is, what do you do with old season items? Do you actually move them from corporate direct or especially retail channels into discount channels, or do you rather not sell them at all? What this complicated distribution structure leads to is usually a kind of multi-level distribution. And multi-level distribution leads to two very different types how you can do pricing, depending on what type of product you sell. If you are a producer who sells a product where people care relatively little about, you probably work with a push strategy. A product where people care relatively little about is a product where people tend to buy the product more when they tend to see it in the supermarket. Take an average supermarket and stand in front of any shelf, let's say the shelf for bottled water or for yogurt. Each brand gets a certain part of that shelf, and you can probably assume that if one brand covered a larger space of that shelf, then customers are more likely to see that brand and hence more likely to buy. So the idea of a push strategy is that producers can push products into the market by incentivizing distributors to present them more prominently in the store. Now, one very efficient way of incentivizing a distributor to do that is to make the product more profitable for the distributor. So we change the wholesale price in order to improve product placement, because for every product sold, the distributor would earn more money. There are multiple examples for this: functional discounts, quantity discounts, cash discounts, and I talk about this in a minute. An entirely different strategy is when you assume that consumers desire your specific product. And if a store wouldn't have that product, then probably they would change stores. Think about a company like Apple. If you want an iPhone, you want an iPhone. You don't go into a store and then decide to buy an Android phone later because it's cheaper, because you actually want an iPhone. And if your store doesn't have an iPhone, you change stores. In such a logic, we're talking about pull strategy. And it's not the producer who can push products into the market. It's the consumers who pull products through the distribution chain from the distributor and from the producer. If you're in a pull strategy, you apply everything that we discussed in the last section. The idea of price discounts, bonus packs, displays, any type of sales promotion, which changes the retail price and hence makes the product more attractive for the consumer, is usually part of a pull strategy. Now, to finish, let me give you some example of push strategy. It's an entirely separate topic, and you probably discussed this in more detail in a retailing class that you may have. But just to give you some examples, there are functional discounts, which give discounts in the wholesale price depending on certain activities that the retailer does for the manufacturer. For example, the retailer may get 20% off because they store the product. There may be another 12% off because they ship the product, and another 5% because they ensure the shelf is always full and the shelf is always clean, leading to a product that has a list price of 1,000, but only a wholesale price of 432, for example. There may be quantity discounts that are either purchased because of cost savings. Shipping large orders may be more efficient than shipping small orders, or the same type of second-degree price discrimination that we have seen in the last session. They can be cumulative, so that you get a discount when you reach a certain threshold over a certain period, say half a year or a year, or they can be non-cumulative, that you need to buy the items at one go. Other examples are traditional cash discounts. For example, when you pay your bills on time, you may be allowed to deduct 2% when you pay the bill within 10 days. And there may be seasonal discounts, where I give special discounts for an item when it's Easter or Christmas, or when it's outside of Easter or outside of Christmas, in order to convince retailers to position it. There may be promotional allowances that give retailers the possibility to use money to position the product more prominently, either in the leaflets they send to consumers or on their website or in the store itself. Lots of other examples exist. And this brings us to the end of session 8. Next week, we have the last session, which is session 9, where I talk a little bit about how prices change over time, both short term, we call this yield management, and long term, which we call pricing across the product lifecycle. So thank you, and I see you next week.